I will never forget the moment my brother stood on that corporate stage, accepting the Vice President Award for Innovative Market Expansion, while the CEO praised his, quote, solo vision and independent execution. What they did not know was that every strategy, every client relationship, and every breakthrough idea had my fingerprints all over it. 3 days later, when I submitted my resignation and watched their quarterly projections collapse by 47%, they finally understood the difference between taking credit and earning it. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The applause thundered through the grand ballroom of the Meridian Hotel as my brother Daniel stepped up to the mahogany podium, his custom-tailored navy suit catching the stage lights perfectly. The annual Hartwell Industries Leadership Awards ceremony was the pinnacle event of our corporate calendar, where the company's top performers received recognition before an audience of 300 executives, board members, and industry leaders. I watched from table 17, strategically positioned near the back of the room, far from the spotlight, where the real decision-makers networked and celebrated. My pewter dress was professional but unremarkable, chosen specifically to blend into the background, as I had learned to do so effectively over the past 6 years. The irony was not lost on me that I was witnessing the culmination of my own work being attributed to someone else, yet again. Ladies and gentlemen, CEO Margaret Thornfield announced into the microphone, her silver hair gleaming under the crystal chandeliers. This year's Vice President Award for Outstanding Market Innovation goes to someone who has single-handedly transformed our Southeast Division's performance. Through his independent vision and solo execution, he has increased regional revenue by 68% while establishing partnerships that will drive growth for the next decade. Daniel's smile was radiant as he accepted the crystal trophy, his confidence emanating across the room like a magnetic field. He had always possessed that quality, the ability to command attention and inspire confidence in others. What the audience did not see was the subtle glance he shot in my direction, a fleeting moment of acknowledgement that disappeared so quickly I almost convinced myself I had imagined it. When I joined Hartwell Industries 5 years ago, Daniel began his acceptance speech, his voice carrying easily through the sound system. I knew that success would require innovation, dedication, and the courage to pursue unconventional strategies. The Southeast Expansion Project challenged every assumption about how we approach new markets, and I am grateful for the opportunity to prove that bold thinking yields extraordinary results. I listened to him describe the market analysis methodology that I had developed, the client acquisition framework that I had designed, and the partnership negotiation strategies that I had refined through months of research and relationship building. Each word he spoke represented countless hours of my work, strategies born from my understanding of regional business dynamics, and cultivated through relationships I had spent years developing. My name is Catherine Morgan, and I am 32 years old. For the past 6 years, I have worked as a senior market analyst at Hartwell Industries, a mid-tier consulting firm that specializes in corporate expansion strategies for technology companies. On paper, my role involves data analysis, market research, and strategic recommendations. In reality, I have become the invisible engine that drives many of our most successful initiatives, particularly those that require deep regional knowledge and complex relationship management. The path that led me to this moment began long before Daniel joined the company. I had started at Hartwell immediately after completing my MBA from Northwestern University, drawn by their reputation for innovative approaches to market development and their commitment to promoting talent based on merit rather than connections. My academic background combined finance and international business, with a focus on emerging market dynamics that perfectly aligned with the company's growth objectives. During my first year, I quickly distinguished myself through my analytical capabilities and my intuitive understanding of regional business cultures. While other analysts relied heavily on standardized frameworks and conventional wisdom, I invested time in building genuine relationships with local business leaders, understanding the nuanced factors that influence decision-making in different markets, and developing strategies that accounted for cultural and economic variables that traditional approaches often overlooked. My breakthrough came during the Midwest expansion project in my second year. The senior team had spent months developing a strategy based on demographic data and competitive analysis, but early implementation efforts were failing to gain traction. I recognized that the approach overlooked critical cultural factors that influenced how businesses in smaller Midwest cities approached partnerships and vendor relationships. Working after hours and on weekends, I developed an alternative framework that emphasized community integration and long-term relationship building rather than aggressive sales tactics. I identified key local influencers and designed an approach that positioned Hartwell as a community partner rather than an outside consultant. When I presented my recommendations to the project director, he was initially skeptical but agreed to test the approach in 2 pilot markets. The results exceeded all projections. Within 6 months, the Midwest division had not only met its annual targets, but had established a foundation for sustained growth that continued to generate revenue years later. The success led to my promotion to senior analyst and established my reputation as someone who could navigate complex market dynamics that others found challenging. However, recognition for my contributions remained frustratingly limited. The project director received a promotion and a substantial bonus for the Midwest success, while my role was characterized as excellent support rather than strategic leadership. The pattern became familiar over the following years. I would identify opportunities, develop strategies, build relationships, and execute implementation plans, only to watch others receive credit for the outcomes. The Southeast Expansion Project represented the culmination of this dynamic. When Daniel joined Hartwell as a regional development manager, he was assigned to lead the Southeast Initiative based on his previous experience with a larger consulting firm and his natural leadership presence. His background was impressive on paper, but his actual experience with complex market development was limited, particularly in regions with the cultural and economic complexities that characterized our target markets. From the beginning, it became clear that Daniel would need substantial support to succeed. The Southeast region presented unique challenges that required deep understanding of local business practices, regulatory environments, and relationship dynamics that could not be learned through conventional market research. His initial approaches, while professionally executed, failed to generate meaningful traction with potential clients or partners. Rather than allow the project to fail, I began providing informal guidance and strategic input that evolved into comprehensive support for every aspect of the initiative. I developed the market segmentation analysis that identified the most promising opportunities. I designed the client acquisition framework that accounted for regional preferences and decision-making processes. I identified and cultivated relationships with key local partners who became instrumental in establishing Hartwell's credibility in the market. My contributions extended far beyond traditional analytical support. I attended client meetings as Daniel's research specialist, a role that allowed me to ask probing questions and gather intelligence while he maintained his position as the primary relationship manager. I developed presentation materials that positioned our solutions in ways that resonated with local business cultures. I negotiated partnership agreements that established favorable terms while building foundations for long-term collaboration. The work required extraordinary time and energy investments that extended far beyond normal business hours. I spent weekends researching regional economic trends, evenings building relationships with local business leaders, and countless hours refining strategies based on market feedback and changing conditions. The intellectual and emotional investment was substantial, driven by my commitment to professional excellence and my belief that exceptional work would eventually be recognized and rewarded. As the Southeast project gained momentum and began generating impressive results, I expected that my contributions would become more visible and that I would receive appropriate recognition for my role in the success. The quarterly reports consistently highlighted the innovative approaches and strategic insights that were driving the exceptional performance. But these contributions were attributed to Daniel's leadership rather than collaborative efforts. The disparity between my actual contributions and the recognition I received became increasingly difficult to reconcile. During performance reviews, my supervisor praised my excellent support and, quote, valuable analytical contributions. But my role was consistently characterized as supplementary rather than strategic. Meanwhile, Daniel's career trajectory accelerated rapidly, as the Southeast Project's success established him as a rising star within the organization. The awards ceremony represented the culmination of this pattern. As I listened to Daniel describe the independent vision and solo execution that had driven the Southeast's success, I realized that my contributions had not simply been overlooked or undervalued. They had been systematically erased from the narrative in a way that allowed others to claim full credit for work that was fundamentally collaborative. The audience's enthusiastic response to Daniel's speech demonstrated how effectively the narrative had been constructed. The business leaders in attendance saw him as an innovative thinker who had independently developed groundbreaking strategies and executed them with exceptional skill. The reality of my extensive contributions had been completely obscured by a presentation that emphasized individual achievement over collaborative success. As the evening progressed and I watched Daniel network with senior executives who praised his brilliant strategic thinking and innovative market insights, I understood that this pattern would continue indefinitely unless I took decisive action to change it. The recognition and career advancement that should have resulted from my contributions were being systematically redirected to someone else, while I remained in a supporting role that offered limited opportunities for growth or visibility. The moment of clarity came during the cocktail reception following the awards ceremony. I was standing near the bar, observing the networking dynamics that would shape future opportunities and career trajectories, when I overheard a conversation between two board members discussing Daniel's potential for executive advancement. They spoke with genuine admiration about his strategic capabilities and market insights, completely unaware that they were actually praising my work. In that moment, I understood that my choice was clear. I could continue accepting a supporting role while others built careers on my contributions, or I could take action to ensure that my actual value became visible to the people who made promotion and compensation decisions. The awards ceremony had provided undeniable evidence that excellence alone was insufficient to generate recognition. Success required strategic action to ensure that contributions were properly attributed and valued. The decision crystallized with remarkable clarity. I would not continue building others' careers at the expense of my own professional development. The Southeast Project's success had demonstrated my capability to develop and execute complex strategies that generated exceptional results. If Daniel could receive executive recognition for my work, I could certainly build my own career using those same capabilities. As I left the awards ceremony that evening, I was already formulating the approach that would transform my professional trajectory. The recognition and advancement that had been denied to me while I worked in others' shadows would finally become possible once I stepped into the spotlight and claimed ownership of my contributions. The question was not whether I had the capability to succeed independently, but rather how quickly I could transition from invisible contributor to recognized leader. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The transformation would require careful planning and strategic execution, but the foundation was already in place. My understanding of market dynamics, relationship-building capabilities, and strategic thinking skills had been proven through years of successful implementation. The only missing element was the visibility and attribution that would allow others to recognize the value I had been providing all along. Daniel's moment of triumph had inadvertently provided the catalyst for my own emergence. By claiming sole credit for collaborative success, he had created the conditions that would finally force me to advocate for my own recognition and advancement. The skills that had made him successful were actually my skills, and it was time for the broader organization to understand that critical distinction. The awards ceremony marked the end of my willingness to work in the shadows, and the beginning of my commitment to claiming the recognition that my contributions deserved. The applause that had celebrated Daniel's achievement would soon be redirected toward its rightful recipient, and the career advancement that had been built on my work would finally benefit the person who had actually earned it. The morning after the awards ceremony, I arrived at the Hartwell Industries headquarters 45 minutes before my usual time, not because I had pressing deadlines, but because I needed space to think clearly about my professional trajectory. The 37th floor housed the Strategic Development Division, where glass-walled offices overlooked downtown Chicago's financial district. My workspace occupied a corner cubicle that provided an excellent view of the city skyline, but remained strategically positioned away from the executive corridor, where senior management conducted their most important discussions. My daily routine had evolved over 6 years to maximize my impact while maintaining the low profile that seemed to be expected of analysts in our organizational structure. I typically reviewed overnight market reports from our international offices, analyzed competitive intelligence gathered by our research team, and prepared briefing materials for project directors who would present findings to senior leadership. The work itself was intellectually stimulating and professionally satisfying, but the recognition pathway remained frustratingly indirect. Catherine Morgan's professional identity had been carefully constructed to embody reliability, competence, and strategic thinking, while avoiding the kind of assertiveness that might threaten established hierarchies. My approach to workplace relationships emphasized collaboration and support rather than competition or self-promotion. This strategy had generated substantial respect from colleagues and consistent positive performance evaluations, but it had not translated into the career advancement that typically rewarded such contributions. The Southeast Expansion Project had begun 18 months earlier when Daniel was assigned to lead the initiative based on his previous experience with market development at Morrison Consulting, a larger firm where he had worked on similar projects. His background included an MBA from Wharton and 5 years of experience in strategic consulting, credentials that positioned him as the natural choice for a high-visibility assignment that would test Hartwell's ability to penetrate new regional markets. However, Daniel's actual experience with the cultural and economic complexities that characterize Southeast business environments was limited. His previous projects had focused primarily on established markets where standardized approaches and conventional wisdom provided reliable frameworks for success. The Southeast region presented unique challenges that required nuanced understanding of local business practices, regulatory variations, and relationship dynamics that could not be addressed through traditional consulting methodologies. From the project's inception, it became apparent that Daniel would require substantial support to navigate these complexities effectively. His initial market analysis relied heavily on demographic data and competitive intelligence that provided useful baseline information but failed to capture the cultural factors that influence decision-making processes in our target markets. Early client presentations generated polite interest but limited commitment, suggesting that our value proposition was not resonating with local business leaders in ways that motivated action. Rather than allow the project to struggle or fail, I began providing informal guidance that gradually evolved into comprehensive strategic support. My contributions initially focused on refining the market analysis to incorporate regional economic trends and cultural preferences that affected business development approaches. This work required extensive research into local business practices, regulatory environments, and competitive dynamics that shaped market opportunities. The market segmentation analysis that ultimately guided our client acquisition strategy emerged from weeks of detailed research into regional industry clusters, economic development patterns, and business relationship networks. I identified 17 distinct market segments across 6 states, each characterized by specific preferences for vendor relationships, decision-making timeframes, and value proposition elements that influenced partnership decisions. This analysis revealed that Southeast business leaders placed significantly greater emphasis on long-term relationship building and community integration than their counterparts in other regions. Traditional consulting approaches that emphasized immediate value delivery and rapid implementation often failed to generate trust among potential clients who preferred to establish personal relationships before committing to significant business partnerships. Based on these insights, I developed an alternative client acquisition framework that positioned Hartwell as a community partner rather than an external consultant. This approach emphasized our commitment to supporting regional economic development while demonstrating genuine understanding of local business cultures and market dynamics. The framework included specific strategies for building credibility within local business communities and establishing relationships that would facilitate long-term collaboration. The implementation of this approach required substantial personal investment in relationship-building activities that extended far beyond traditional business hours. I attended regional business association meetings, participated in economic development conferences, and scheduled informal meetings with local business leaders to understand their perspectives on market opportunities and challenges. These activities provided invaluable intelligence about client preferences and competitive positioning while establishing the personal connections that would prove crucial for project success. My role in client presentations evolved from providing analytical support to actively participating in relationship development processes. Daniel maintained his position as the primary client contact and project leader, but I became instrumental in asking probing questions that uncovered client needs, addressing technical concerns that required detailed market knowledge, and proposing solutions that demonstrated our understanding of regional business dynamics. The partnership development component of the Southeast project represented another area where my contributions proved essential. Successful market penetration required establishing relationships with local consulting firms, technology providers, and business service organizations that could provide credibility and access within established business networks. Daniel's approach to partnership development relied on formal presentations and standardized partnership agreements that failed to generate meaningful interest from potential collaborators. I recognized that effective partnership development in the Southeast region required a more nuanced approach that emphasized mutual benefit and long-term collaboration rather than transactional relationships. I identified 12 key organizations whose partnership could provide strategic value while offering them genuine benefits from collaboration with Hartwell. Rather than pursuing formal partnership agreements immediately, I focused on building relationships through collaborative projects and mutual referrals that demonstrated our commitment to regional business development. This approach yielded remarkable results. Within 6 months, we had established partnership relationships with 7 organizations that provided access to their client networks while enhancing our credibility within local business communities. These partnerships generated over 40% of our client leads during the project's most successful period and established foundations for sustained growth that continued to benefit Hartwell long after the initial implementation phase. The client acquisition results exceeded all internal projections and established the Southeast Division as one of Hartwell's most profitable regional operations. During the project's first year, we secured contracts with 23 new clients, representing over $4 million in annual revenue. The second year generated additional growth that brought total regional revenue to $7.2 million, representing a 68% increase over baseline projections. More importantly, the client relationships we established demonstrated exceptional retention rates and expansion potential. 87% of initial clients renewed their contracts for extended services, and 64% expanded their engagements to include additional service areas. This performance indicated that our approach had successfully addressed the relationship-building preferences that characterized Southeast business culture, while delivering tangible value that justified continued investment. The success metrics extended beyond financial performance to include qualitative measures that reflected our impact on client business outcomes. Client satisfaction surveys consistently rated our services above industry benchmarks for strategic insight, implementation support, and relationship management. Several clients provided testimonials that specifically highlighted our understanding of regional business dynamics and our commitment to supporting their long-term success rather than pursuing short-term consulting revenues. These results established Daniel as a rising star within Hartwell's organizational hierarchy and positioned him for rapid career advancement. His association with the Southeast project's success generated invitations to present at industry conferences, participate in executive strategy sessions, and lead additional high-visibility initiatives that further enhanced his professional reputation. However, my contributions to this success remained largely invisible to senior leadership and external stakeholders. Internal project documentation attributed the innovative strategies and exceptional results to Daniel's leadership and strategic vision, while characterizing my role as providing analytical support and research assistance. Performance evaluations praised my excellent collaboration and valuable contributions, but did not acknowledge the extent of my strategic input or relationship development activities. The disparity between my actual contributions and the recognition I received became increasingly problematic, as the project's success generated opportunities for career advancement that were directed toward Daniel rather than shared among team members. His promotion to Senior Regional Director occurred 8 months after the Southeast project exceeded its annual targets, while my compensation and title remained unchanged, despite performance that clearly exceeded expectations for my organizational level. This pattern reflected broader organizational dynamics that consistently undervalued analytical roles while overemphasizing leadership positions in recognition and advancement decisions. The assumption appeared to be that strategic thinking and relationship building were primarily leadership functions, while analysts provided technical support that, however excellent, did not warrant executive-level recognition or compensation. My professional development had reached an inflection point where continued excellence in my current role would not generate the career advancement that my contributions warranted. The Southeast Project had demonstrated my capability to develop and execute complex strategies that achieved exceptional results, but this capability would remain unrecognized as long as I continued working in supporting roles where others received credit for collaborative success. The award ceremony had crystallized this situation by providing undeniable evidence that my strategic contributions would continue to be attributed to others regardless of their actual scope or impact. Daniel's acceptance speech had effectively erased my role from the project narrative while positioning him as an innovative leader whose independent vision had driven the success. This experience forced me to confront the reality that professional competence alone would not generate appropriate recognition within organizational structures that systematically undervalued analytical contributions. Career advancement would require strategic action to ensure that my capabilities became visible to decision-makers who controlled promotion and compensation processes. The challenge was not proving my competence, which had been demonstrated repeatedly through successful project outcomes, but rather establishing my professional identity as a strategic leader rather than a technical specialist. This transformation would require transitioning from collaborative support roles to positions where my contributions could be directly attributed and appropriately recognized. My educational background and professional experience provided a strong foundation for this transition. The MBA from Northwestern had emphasized strategic thinking and leadership development, while my 6 years at Hartwell had generated deep expertise in market development and relationship building. The Southeast Project had proven my ability to develop innovative strategies and execute complex initiatives that achieved exceptional results. The missing element was not capability but rather positioning. My professional brand had been constructed around collaboration and support rather than leadership and innovation. Changing this perception would require strategic action that demonstrated my capacity for independent achievement, while leveraging the skills and relationships I had developed through collaborative work. The decision to pursue this transformation was not driven by resentment or frustration, but rather by professional ambition and self-respect. I had invested substantial time and energy in developing capabilities that deserved recognition and compensation commensurate with their value. Continuing to accept supporting roles while others built careers on my contributions would represent a failure to advocate for my own professional advancement. The awards ceremony had provided the catalyst for this recognition, but the underlying issues had been building for years through repeated experiences where my contributions were undervalued or misattributed. The time had come to take action that would ensure my capabilities received appropriate recognition and generated career advancement opportunities that reflected my actual value to the organization. Hartwell Industries operated within a consulting ecosystem where perception often mattered more than performance, and where organizational hierarchies determined not only compensation, but also the attribution of strategic insights and innovative thinking. The company had been founded 22 years earlier by Marcus Hartwell, a former McKinsey partner who built the firm around a philosophy of collaborative excellence and merit-based advancement. However, the practical implementation of these principles had evolved over time to reflect the subtle biases and systemic inequalities that characterized the broader consulting industry. The corporate structure at Hartwell followed traditional consulting firm hierarchies, with analysts and senior analysts providing research and analytical support to project directors and regional managers who maintained client relationships and received credit for strategic recommendations. Above this operational level, senior directors and vice presidents shaped overall strategy and served as the primary interface with executive leadership. Board-level positions remained occupied by individuals who had either founded the company or brought substantial client relationships when they joined the organization. This hierarchical structure created distinct pathways for career advancement that were not always aligned with actual contribution levels or strategic capabilities. Client-facing roles typically offered faster promotion trajectories and higher compensation than analytical positions, regardless of the comparative value generated by each function. The assumption underlying this disparity was that client relationship management required more sophisticated skills than analytical work, despite evidence that strategic insights often drove client satisfaction and retention more than relationship maintenance alone. The Southeast Expansion Project existed within this organizational context as a high-visibility initiative that would influence promotion decisions and resource allocation for multiple individuals. Success on such projects typically generated career advancement opportunities for project leaders while providing performance evaluation benefits for supporting team members. However, the specific nature of recognition and advancement remained heavily influenced by how contributions were perceived and attributed by senior leadership. Regional market development represented one of Hartwell's core competencies, but the company's approach to new market penetration had traditionally emphasized standardized methodologies that could be applied consistently across different geographic areas. This approach offered operational efficiency and quality control benefits, but often failed to account for regional variations in business culture, regulatory environments, and competitive dynamics that influenced market entry success. The consulting industry's emphasis on scalable solutions created systematic pressure to develop approaches that could be replicated efficiently rather than customized extensively for specific market conditions. This preference for standardization often undervalued the deep market knowledge and relationship-building capabilities that were essential for success in culturally distinct regions like the Southeast, where business practices differed significantly from national norms. Industry benchmarks for consulting project success typically focused on financial metrics such as revenue generation, client acquisition rates, and contract renewal percentages. While these measures provided useful indicators of business performance, they did not capture the strategic innovation or market insight development that often drove exceptional results. The emphasis on quantifiable outcomes sometimes obscured the intellectual contributions that made success possible, particularly when those contributions came from team members who were not in formal leadership positions. The consulting sector's competitive dynamics also influenced how firms approached talent development and recognition. Industry-wide competition for senior-level talent created pressure to identify and promote individuals who could attract clients and generate revenue growth. This focus on external marketability sometimes overshadowed internal contributions that were essential for project success, but less visible to potential clients or industry observers. Hartwell's client base consisted primarily of technology companies seeking guidance on market expansion, operational optimization, and strategic planning initiatives. These clients typically engaged consulting services when they lacked internal expertise for specific challenges, or when they needed external validation for strategic decisions that carried significant risk. The nature of these relationships required consulting firms to demonstrate both analytical rigor and strategic insight while maintaining confidence in their recommendations. Client expectations had evolved over the years to demand not only technical competence, but also deep understanding of industry trends and market dynamics that could influence long-term success. This evolution favored consulting teams that combined analytical capabilities with practical market knowledge and relationship-building skills. However, client-facing presentations and relationship management typically remained the responsibility of senior team members, regardless of where strategic insights actually originated. The Southeast region presented unique challenges that distinguished it from other markets where Hartwell had successfully operated. Business culture in the Southeast emphasized personal relationships and community integration to a degree that differed markedly from the more transactional approaches that were effective in markets like the Northeast or West Coast. Local business leaders often preferred to establish personal trust before engaging in significant business partnerships, requiring consulting approaches that prioritized long-term relationship building over immediate value demonstration. Regulatory environments across Southeast states varied considerably in ways that affected market entry strategies and operational planning. Some states offered substantial incentives for business development, while others maintained more restrictive approaches that influenced where companies chose to establish operations. Understanding these variations required detailed knowledge of local political dynamics and economic development priorities that were not readily available through standard market research sources. Competitive landscapes in Southeast markets also differed from national patterns due to the presence of established regional firms that maintained strong local relationships and deep understanding of cultural preferences. National consulting firms entering these markets often struggled to establish credibility among potential clients who preferred working with organizations that demonstrated genuine commitment to regional business development, rather than treating local markets as expansion opportunities. The economic development patterns that characterized Southeast business growth reflected historical factors and cultural preferences that influenced how companies approached expansion decisions and vendor relationships. Manufacturing and technology sectors had experienced significant growth in recent years, but this expansion was often driven by companies that valued long-term stability and community integration over rapid scalability and short-term profit maximization. Understanding these regional characteristics required analytical capabilities that extended beyond traditional market research to include cultural intelligence and relationship development skills. Success in Southeast markets demanded consulting approaches that demonstrated genuine appreciation for local business practices, while providing strategic value that justified premium pricing compared to regional competitors. Hartwell's previous attempts to enter Southeast markets had achieved limited success due to approaches that failed to account for these regional specificities. Standard consulting methodologies that emphasized rapid implementation and measurable short-term results often generated polite interest but limited commitment from potential clients who preferred more deliberate decision-making processes and longer evaluation periods. The company's leadership had recognized these challenges when they assigned the Southeast expansion project to Daniel, hoping that his previous market development experience would enable him to navigate the cultural and competitive complexities that had hindered earlier efforts. However, Daniel's background was primarily in markets where standardized approaches had proven effective, leaving him unprepared for the relationship-building requirements and cultural sensitivity that Southeast success demanded. The organizational context within which this project operated reflected broader industry dynamics that often undervalued the analytical and strategic contributions that made client success possible. Senior leadership typically focused on client-facing activities and revenue generation metrics, while treating research and analysis as supporting functions rather than strategic drivers of business development. This perspective created systematic bias toward recognizing individuals who maintained client relationships and delivered presentations, rather than those who developed the strategic insights and market knowledge that made client satisfaction possible. The bias was not necessarily intentional, but resulted from organizational assumptions about which activities generated the most value for clients and the firm. Performance evaluation processes at Hartwell reflected these assumptions through criteria that emphasized client feedback, revenue responsibility, and leadership visibility, rather than strategic innovation or analytical excellence. While analytical contributions were acknowledged in performance reviews, they were typically characterized as support functions rather than strategic leadership activities that warranted executive-level recognition or compensation. The promotion pathway for analytical roles remained significantly more limited than client-facing positions, despite evidence that analytical capabilities often drove the strategic insights that differentiated Hartwell's services from competitors. This disparity created career development challenges for high-performing analysts who possessed strategic thinking capabilities but lacked opportunities to demonstrate leadership in contexts that senior management would recognize and reward. Industry compensation benchmarks reinforced these organizational patterns by offering substantially higher compensation for client-facing roles than analytical positions, regardless of the comparative contribution levels or strategic impact generated by each function. This compensation structure created economic incentives for talented analysts to transition into client management roles, even when their capabilities might generate greater value, through continued focus on strategic analysis and market development. The consulting industry's emphasis on individual achievement over collaborative success also influenced how contributions were recognized and attributed within project teams. Success stories were typically presented as individual accomplishments rather than team efforts, creating pressure for project leaders to claim credit for collaborative achievements in order to advance their own careers. This dynamic was particularly problematic for high-performing team members who preferred collaborative approaches and did not actively seek individual recognition for their contributions. Such individuals often found that their strategic insights and innovative thinking were attributed to more visible team members, who were better positioned to claim credit with senior leadership and external stakeholders. The Southeast Expansion Project operated within all of these systemic constraints and biases, creating conditions where exceptional analytical and strategic contributions could easily be overlooked or misattributed if they came from team members who were not in formal leadership positions. The project's ultimate success would be evaluated primarily through financial metrics and client feedback, with credit for achievement flowing predominantly to the designated project leader, regardless of the actual distribution of strategic contributions. Understanding this organizational and industry context was essential for recognizing why Catherine's substantial contributions to the Southeast Project's success had not generated appropriate recognition or career advancement opportunities. The system within which she operated was not designed to identify and reward analytical excellence that occurred outside formal leadership roles, creating the conditions that would ultimately force her to take strategic action to ensure that her capabilities received appropriate recognition and compensation. The first indication that Catherine possessed capabilities beyond her designated role emerged during her third month at Hartwell Industries, when the firm was struggling with a client retention crisis that threatened to undermine several major accounts. The Chicago office had lost 3 significant clients within a 6-week period, each citing concerns about strategic recommendations that failed to account for evolving market conditions and competitive pressures that were reshaping their industries. Senior leadership had convened multiple emergency strategy sessions to address the retention problems, but their analyses relied heavily on standard client feedback protocols and industry benchmarking studies that provided limited insight into the specific factors driving client dissatisfaction. The executive team appeared genuinely perplexed by the departures, particularly since the affected clients had previously expressed satisfaction with Hartwell's analytical capabilities and strategic recommendations. As a junior analyst, Catherine was not invited to participate in these executive discussions, but her proximity to the project documentation and client communication records provided her with comprehensive exposure to the underlying issues. Her natural analytical instincts drove her to examine the client relationships more systematically than the crisis management approaches that were being pursued by senior leadership. Her analysis revealed a pattern that had escaped the attention of more senior colleagues. The departed clients were all technology companies that operated in rapidly evolving market segments, where competitive dynamics and consumer preferences changed significantly faster than traditional strategic planning cycles could accommodate. Hartwell's recommendations had been based on market analyses that were technically accurate, but failed to account for emerging trends that would reshape competitive landscapes within months rather than years. The consulting firm's standard approach to strategic analysis emphasized comprehensive research and detailed forecasting that provided clients with thorough understanding of current market conditions and established competitive patterns. However, this methodology was poorly suited to industries where disruptive technologies and shifting consumer behaviors created volatility that rendered traditional forecasting approaches inadequate for strategic planning purposes. Catherine recognized that these clients required a fundamentally different analytical approach that emphasized adaptive strategy development and continuous market monitoring rather than static strategic plans based on historical data and linear trend projections. The departed clients had likely grown frustrated with recommendations that became obsolete before implementation could generate meaningful results. Rather than simply identifying the problem, Catherine developed a comprehensive alternative framework that could address the analytical challenges these clients faced. Her approach emphasized real-time market intelligence gathering, scenario-based planning that accounted for multiple potential future states, and strategic recommendations that included built-in adaptation mechanisms for responding to changing market conditions. The framework incorporated advanced data analytics techniques that could process large volumes of market information to identify emerging trends before they became apparent through traditional research methods. Catherine had taught herself these analytical approaches through independent study and experimentation with publicly available data sources, recognizing that conventional market research methods were increasingly inadequate for fast-moving technology sectors. Her proposal included specific recommendations for restructuring client engagement processes to provide continuous strategic support rather than discrete consulting projects. This approach would enable Hartwell to maintain ongoing relationships with technology clients while providing them with the adaptive strategic guidance they required for success in volatile market environments. Catherine documented her analysis and recommendations in a comprehensive report that she submitted to her direct supervisor, hoping that the insights might contribute to the retention crisis resolution efforts. Her supervisor, Marcus Webb, was initially skeptical about recommendations from a junior analyst that contradicted established firm methodologies. But the thoroughness of her analysis and the practical applicability of her suggestions convinced him to review the proposal more carefully. The report demonstrated analytical capabilities that extended far beyond what was typically expected from analysts at Catherine's experience level. Her understanding of market dynamics was sophisticated and nuanced, while her proposed solutions addressed complex strategic challenges that had puzzled more senior consultants. The writing quality and strategic thinking reflected graduate-level business education and substantial practical experience that seemed inconsistent with her junior position. Marcus decided to test Catherine's framework by applying her recommendations to a current client relationship that was showing early signs of dissatisfaction, similar to the patterns that had preceded recent departures. Nexus Technologies was a software development company that had engaged Hartwell to develop market expansion strategies, but had expressed frustration with recommendations that failed to account for rapid changes in customer preferences and competitive positioning. Rather than pursue the standard consulting approach, Marcus authorized Catherine to implement her alternative framework with Nexus Technologies as a pilot project. This assignment represented a significant departure from normal protocols, since junior analysts were typically limited to supporting roles rather than direct client engagement responsibilities. Catherine's first meeting with Nexus Technologies leadership revealed the extent of their frustration with traditional consulting approaches. Chief Executive Officer Sarah Kim explained that the company operated in market segments where competitive advantages could emerge or disappear within weeks rather than quarters, making strategic plans based on historical analysis virtually useless for operational decision-making. The technology sector's volatility had intensified significantly over recent years, as artificial intelligence capabilities, cloud computing infrastructure, and mobile platform development created constant disruption across multiple industry segments. Companies like Nexus required strategic guidance that could help them navigate this volatility, rather than comprehensive plans that assumed stable market conditions. Catherine's approach to the Nexus engagement emphasized collaborative analysis rather than consultant-driven recommendations. She spent extensive time understanding the company's operational challenges and market positioning before developing strategic guidance that accounted for the uncertainty and rapid change that characterized their competitive environment. Her analysis incorporated real-time market monitoring systems that could track competitive developments, consumer behavior shifts, and technology advancement patterns that influence strategic opportunities and threats. Rather than providing static recommendations, Catherine developed dynamic strategic frameworks that enabled Nexus leadership to adapt their approaches based on changing market conditions. The results exceeded expectations for both Nexus Technologies and Hartwell Industries. Within 3 months, Nexus had implemented strategic adjustments based on Catherine's framework that generated 15% revenue growth, while avoiding competitive threats that had damaged several industry competitors. More importantly, the collaborative approach had strengthened the client relationship and positioned Hartwell as a strategic partner rather than a traditional consulting vendor. Sarah Kim provided feedback that praised Catherine's understanding of technology sector dynamics and her ability to develop practical solutions for strategic challenges that other consultants had failed to address effectively. The success prompted Nexus to expand their engagement with Hartwell and recommend the firm to other technology companies that faced similar strategic challenges. Marcus Webb recognized that Catherine's capabilities extended far beyond typical analyst responsibilities, and began involving her in client meetings and strategic planning sessions that were normally restricted to senior consultants. Her contributions to these discussions consistently demonstrated insights that enhanced the firm's understanding of client needs and market opportunities. However, the organizational structure at Hartwell limited the recognition that Catherine could receive for her innovative approach and exceptional results. While Marcus appreciated her contributions and provided positive performance evaluations, the firm's hierarchical advancement processes required client-facing experience and leadership responsibilities that were not readily available to analysts, regardless of their strategic capabilities. Catherine's success with Nexus Technologies became a case study that influenced how other project teams approached technology sector clients, but her role in developing the methodology remained largely invisible to senior leadership. The framework she had created was adopted more broadly within the firm, but the intellectual property and strategic insight were attributed to the project directors who implemented her recommendations, rather than the analyst who had developed them. This pattern of contribution without recognition became familiar, as Catherine's analytical capabilities and strategic insights continued to generate exceptional results for client engagements across multiple industry sectors. Her understanding of market dynamics and ability to develop innovative solutions consistently exceeded expectations, but the organizational structure prevented her from receiving credit commensurate with her contributions. The Nexus Technologies engagement also revealed Catherine's exceptional ability to build client relationships based on genuine value creation rather than traditional consulting sales approaches. Her collaborative style and practical focus on solving real business problems generated client trust and satisfaction that led to expanded engagements and referral opportunities. Sarah Kim became an advocate for Catherine's approach within the technology sector, recommending her specifically when other companies sought strategic consulting services. These referrals created opportunities for Catherine to work with additional technology clients, but the formal client relationship management remained the responsibility of senior consultants who received credit for the business development success. Catherine's growing reputation within the technology sector reflected her unique combination of analytical excellence and practical business understanding that distinguished her from both junior analysts and senior consultants. Technology executives appreciated her ability to translate complex market dynamics into actionable strategic guidance, while avoiding the theoretical approaches that often characterized traditional consulting services. Her success prompted several technology companies to request Catherine's involvement in their strategic planning processes, creating demand for her services that exceeded her availability within Hartwell's organizational structure. However, the firm's policies prevented direct client relationships for analysts, limiting Catherine's ability to capitalize on the reputation she had developed through exceptional performance. The recognition of her capabilities within the technology sector created professional opportunities that extended beyond her role at Hartwell Industries. Industry conferences began inviting her to speak about adaptive strategy development and real-time market analysis techniques that she had pioneered through her client work. These speaking opportunities provided visibility within the broader consulting community and established her reputation as an innovative strategic thinker. Technology industry publications featured articles about Catherine's analytical frameworks and strategic methodologies, generating recognition that attracted attention from competing consulting firms and potential clients. The external validation of her expertise contrasted sharply with the limited internal recognition she received within Hartwell's hierarchical structure. The disconnect between her external reputation and internal advancement opportunities became increasingly problematic, as Catherine's capabilities and contributions continued to exceed the expectations and compensation associated with her analyst position. The firm benefited substantially from her innovations and client relationships, but the organizational structure prevented her from receiving appropriate recognition or advancement. Catherine's exceptional performance across multiple client engagements established a pattern of strategic thinking and problem-solving capabilities that distinguished her from colleagues at similar organizational levels. Her ability to understand complex market dynamics, develop innovative solutions, and build strong client relationships reflected skills that were typically associated with senior consulting positions rather than analytical support roles. The early signs of Catherine's distinctive capabilities had emerged through her response to challenging client situations and her development of innovative approaches to strategic analysis. These capabilities would continue to manifest throughout her tenure at Hartwell Industries, consistently generating exceptional results while remaining under-recognized within the firm's traditional advancement pathways. The moment that would define Catherine's understanding of her position within Hartwell Industries occurred during the quarterly strategy review meeting in her 8th month with the company. The conference room on the 42nd floor commanded panoramic views of Lake Michigan, its floor-to-ceiling windows providing a backdrop that emphasized the significance of discussions that shaped the firm's strategic direction. Catherine had been invited to attend the meeting as an observer, a recognition of her analytical contributions to several successful client engagements that had generated positive feedback and revenue growth. The agenda focused on evaluating the firm's approach to emerging market opportunities, particularly in the technology sector, where rapid innovation cycles and evolving competitive dynamics created both substantial opportunities and significant risks for consulting firms. Catherine had spent weeks preparing analysis that identified specific market segments where Hartwell could establish competitive advantages through specialized expertise and innovative service delivery approaches. Her research had revealed that traditional consulting methodologies were increasingly inadequate for technology companies that operated in environments characterized by constant disruption and accelerated decision-making requirements. The analysis included detailed recommendations for restructuring service delivery models to provide adaptive strategic guidance that could accommodate the volatility and uncertainty that defined technology sector challenges. Senior leadership had requested this analysis specifically because of Catherine's demonstrated expertise in technology sector dynamics and her track record of developing innovative solutions for complex client challenges. Her previous work with Nexus Technologies and other technology clients had established her reputation as someone who understood the unique analytical requirements that characterized fast-moving industries. The meeting began with presentations from regional directors who outlined their assessments of market opportunities and competitive positioning within their respective geographic areas. These presentations followed standard formats that emphasized quantitative analysis and risk assessment frameworks that were well established within the consulting industry but potentially inadequate for technology sector applications. When Margaret Thornfield, the Chief Executive Officer, called for discussion of technology sector opportunities, Catherine expected that her analysis would be referenced, or that she might be invited to present her findings to the executive team. Instead, Regional Director James Morrison began discussing technology sector strategies based on conventional market research approaches that ignored many of the unique factors that Catherine had identified through her specialized research. Morrison's presentation recommended that Hartwell pursue technology sector opportunities using the same client engagement methodologies and strategic analysis frameworks that had proven successful in more traditional industries. His approach emphasized comprehensive market research and detailed strategic planning that would provide technology clients with thorough analysis of competitive positioning and market opportunities. Catherine recognized immediately that Morrison's recommendations would likely generate the same client satisfaction problems that had prompted the original analysis request. Technology companies required adaptive strategic guidance that could respond to changing market conditions rather than static plans based on historical data and linear trend projections. After Morrison completed his presentation, Margaret Thornfield opened the discussion for questions and additional perspectives from meeting participants. Catherine raised her hand and waited to be recognized, preparing to present the alternative analysis that addressed the specific challenges Morrison's approach would likely encounter. Catherine, Margaret acknowledged, you have been working extensively with technology sector clients. What is your perspective on James's recommendations? Catherine stood and began explaining her analysis of technology sector requirements and the limitations of traditional consulting approaches for addressing the strategic challenges these clients faced. She outlined the alternative framework she had developed and provided specific examples of how adaptive strategic guidance had generated superior results compared to conventional methodologies. Her presentation was comprehensive and well documented, drawing on client feedback and performance metrics that demonstrated the effectiveness of her alternative approach. She explained how technology companies required consulting relationships that provided ongoing strategic support rather than discrete project-based engagements, and how traditional analysis methods often became obsolete before implementation could generate meaningful results. As Catherine concluded her presentation, she noticed that several senior executives were taking notes and appeared genuinely interested in the alternative perspective she had provided. The analysis directly addressed concerns that had been raised about client retention in the technology sector and offered practical solutions that could improve both client satisfaction and revenue generation. However, when Margaret Thornfield responded to Catherine's presentation, her tone carried a subtle but unmistakable message about organizational boundaries and role expectations that would shape Catherine's understanding of her position within the firm's hierarchy. Catherine, we appreciate your analytical work and the insights you have developed through your client interactions. Margaret began, her voice maintaining the professional courtesy that characterized executive communications, while establishing clear parameters for the discussion. However, strategic planning for new market opportunities requires consideration of factors that extend beyond individual client relationships and analytical frameworks. Margaret continued, the recommendations you have presented reflect valuable analytical work, but strategic decision-making must account for organizational capabilities, resource allocation requirements, and competitive positioning considerations that are evaluated at the executive level. While your analytical contributions are certainly valued, the strategic direction for technology sector engagement will be determined based on broader organizational considerations. The dismissal was delivered with professional politeness that made direct confrontation impossible while clearly establishing that Catherine's analytical expertise would not influence strategic decision-making processes regardless of its quality or relevance. The message conveyed that her role was to provide analytical support for decisions made by others rather than to participate in strategic planning that would shape the firm's direction. James Morrison immediately reinforced Margaret's position by acknowledging Catherine's analytical contributions, while emphasizing that his recommendations were based on extensive experience with market development initiatives and comprehensive understanding of organizational capabilities that enabled successful implementation of strategic initiatives. Catherine has certainly developed valuable insights through her analytical work, Morrison stated, but strategic planning requires balancing multiple considerations, including risk management, resource allocation, and competitive positioning, that must be evaluated comprehensively rather than focusing primarily on analytical frameworks. The exchange effectively ended Catherine's participation in the strategic discussion while maintaining the appearance of valuing her contributions. The executive team proceeded to approve Morrison's recommendations without further consideration of the alternative analysis that Catherine had presented, despite evidence that his approach would likely encounter the same challenges that had prompted the original research request. Following the meeting, Catherine's direct supervisor Marcus Webb approached her privately to acknowledge the quality of her analysis while explaining the organizational dynamics that had influenced the decision-making process. His explanation revealed the systematic factors that limited her influence within strategic planning discussions regardless of the analytical excellence she demonstrated. "Your analysis was thorough and well-reasoned," Marcus explained. "But strategic decisions at this level involve considerations beyond individual analytical frameworks. The executive team must evaluate recommendations based on organizational capabilities, implementation requirements, and competitive positioning factors that require broader perspective than individual client relationships can provide." Marcus continued, "Your contributions are valued, and the analytical work you have done with technology clients has been exceptional. However, the strategic planning process operates at a different level that requires considering multiple factors simultaneously. The best analytical work provides input for strategic decisions, but those decisions must be made by individuals who have comprehensive understanding of organizational capabilities and market positioning." The conversation clarified that Catherine's analytical expertise would continue to be valued as input for strategic planning processes, but that her role would remain limited to providing supporting analysis rather than participating in decision-making that would shape the firm's direction. The organizational hierarchy reserved strategic planning authority for executives who were considered to have broader perspective and greater experience with complex business decisions. Catherine understood that the limitation was not based on questions about her analytical capabilities or the quality of her strategic thinking, but rather on organizational assumptions about the relationship between analytical work and strategic decision-making. The firm's structure assumed that analytical contributions, however excellent, represented input for strategic decisions rather than strategic thinking that could directly influence organizational direction. The technology sector engagement proceeded according to Morrison's recommendations, and within 6 months, the firm encountered exactly the client satisfaction problems that Catherine's analysis had predicted. Technology clients expressed frustration with consulting approaches that failed to provide the adaptive strategic guidance they required, leading to contract cancellations and negative feedback that damaged Hartwell's reputation within the technology sector. The client retention problems validated Catherine's analytical predictions while demonstrating the cost of organizational decision-making processes that failed to incorporate available expertise effectively. However, the connection between her recommendations and the subsequent problems was not acknowledged formally, and no systematic evaluation was conducted to determine whether alternative approaches might have generated better outcomes. Instead, the technology sector challenges were attributed to market volatility and competitive pressures that were beyond the firm's control, deflecting attention from the strategic planning decisions that had contributed to the client satisfaction problems. The executive team commissioned additional research to understand technology sector requirements, without referencing the analysis that Catherine had already completed and that had accurately predicted the challenges they were experiencing. Catherine observed these developments with growing understanding of the organizational dynamics that would continue to limit her influence, regardless of her analytical capabilities or strategic insights. The firm's hierarchical structure and assumptions about decision-making authority created systematic barriers to incorporating her expertise into strategic planning processes that would benefit from her specialized knowledge. The experience established a pattern that would characterize Catherine's tenure at Hartwell Industries, where her analytical excellence and strategic insights would be valued as supporting contributions, but would not influence strategic decisions that required her expertise for optimal outcomes. The disconnect between her capabilities and her organizational influence would become increasingly problematic as her expertise developed and her understanding of client requirements became more sophisticated. The first dismissal had been delivered with professional courtesy and organizational reasoning that made direct challenge impossible, while clearly establishing the boundaries that would define Catherine's role within the firm. The message was that analytical excellence, regardless of its quality or relevance, would remain subordinate to executive authority in strategic decision-making processes that would benefit from incorporating her specialized expertise. This pattern of contribution without influence would continue throughout Catherine's career at Hartwell Industries, where her analytical capabilities and strategic insights would generate substantial value for client engagements while remaining systematically excluded from the strategic planning processes that would determine the firm's success in markets where her expertise was most relevant and valuable. The weeks following the quarterly strategy meeting marked a fundamental shift in Catherine's approach to professional development. Rather than allowing the dismissal of her strategic insights to diminish her confidence or analytical ambitions, she recognized that organizational recognition would require a different approach to capability building and positioning. The experience had clarified that exceptional analytical work alone would not generate appropriate recognition within existing hierarchical structures, requiring strategic action to establish her expertise in ways that could not be overlooked or dismissed. Catherine began developing a comprehensive professional development strategy that would establish her credibility and expertise through external validation, rather than relying solely on internal recognition processes. This approach required building capabilities and credentials that would demonstrate her strategic thinking abilities to audiences beyond Hartwell Industries, creating leverage that could influence how her contributions were perceived and valued within the organization. The foundation of this strategy involved expanding her analytical capabilities through advanced education and certification programs that would formalize her expertise in areas where she had demonstrated exceptional performance. Catherine enrolled in executive education programs at Northwestern University's Kellogg School of Management, focusing on strategic analysis methodologies and market development frameworks that were becoming increasingly important for consulting firms serving technology sector clients. These executive education programs provided access to cutting-edge analytical techniques and strategic planning methodologies that were not widely available within traditional consulting firm training programs. The coursework emphasized adaptive strategy development, real-time market intelligence systems, and scenario-based planning approaches that aligned perfectly with the analytical frameworks Catherine had developed through her client work at Hartwell. More importantly, the executive education environment provided networking opportunities with senior executives from technology companies and consulting firms who were grappling with similar strategic challenges. These connections enabled Catherine to understand industry trends and client requirements from perspectives that extended beyond her experience at Hartwell, providing broader context for her analytical work and strategic thinking. The executive education program also offered opportunities to present her analytical frameworks and strategic methodologies to audiences of experienced business leaders who could evaluate their quality and practical applicability. Catherine's presentations consistently received positive feedback from program participants who recognized the innovative approaches she had developed and the practical value they could provide for addressing complex strategic challenges. Simultaneously, Catherine began writing articles about strategic analysis methodologies and market development frameworks for industry publications that served the consulting and technology sectors. These articles provided platforms for sharing her analytical insights and strategic thinking with broader audiences, while establishing her reputation as an innovative contributor to strategic planning methodologies. Her first published article focused on adaptive strategy development for technology companies operating in volatile market environments. The piece outlined the analytical framework she had developed for addressing the strategic challenges that characterized fast-moving technology sectors, providing detailed explanations of methodology and implementation approaches that other consultants could apply to their own client engagements. The article generated substantial positive feedback from readers who had encountered similar challenges in their own consulting work and appreciated the practical solutions Catherine had developed. Several consulting firm partners contacted her directly to discuss potential collaboration opportunities and to learn more about the analytical techniques she had pioneered. Industry recognition of her published work led to invitations to speak at professional conferences and participate in panel discussions about emerging trends in strategic consulting. These speaking opportunities provided additional platforms for demonstrating her expertise, while building relationships with senior leaders from consulting firms and client organizations who could influence her professional advancement. Catherine's conference presentations consistently drew large audiences and generated positive feedback from attendees who appreciated her practical focus on solving real business problems rather than presenting theoretical frameworks that were difficult to implement. Her speaking style emphasized concrete examples and actionable insights that consulting professionals could immediately apply to their own client relationships. The external recognition generated through publications and speaking engagements began attracting attention from executive recruiters who specialized in placing senior-level consultants with technology sector expertise. These recruiters represented opportunities for Catherine to explore career advancement possibilities that might not be available through internal promotion processes at Hartwell Industries. However, rather than pursuing external opportunities immediately, Catherine recognized that her current position provided valuable access to client relationships and project experiences that could further enhance her expertise and credibility. She decided to leverage external recognition as a foundation for building internal influence, while continuing to develop capabilities that would position her for eventual strategic leadership roles. Catherine also began developing proprietary analytical tools and methodologies that could differentiate her services from standard consulting approaches while providing measurable value for client engagements. These tools incorporated advanced data analytics techniques and real-time market monitoring capabilities that enabled more sophisticated strategic analysis than traditional consulting methodologies could provide. The development of these analytical tools required substantial investment in technology platforms and data sources that extended beyond the resources typically available to individual consultants. Catherine used her personal savings to acquire software licenses and data subscriptions that enabled her to develop analytical capabilities that were not available through Hartwell's standard research infrastructure. Her proprietary analytical tools enabled her to provide clients with strategic insights that were based on more comprehensive and current market intelligence than competitive consulting firms could offer. The superior analytical capabilities generated client feedback that consistently praised the innovative approaches and practical value of her strategic recommendations. Catherine documented her analytical methodologies and strategic frameworks in comprehensive technical papers that could serve as intellectual property for potential future business development. These documents provided detailed explanations of her innovative approaches while establishing formal documentation of her strategic thinking capabilities and analytical innovations. The technical documentation also provided foundation materials for potential publication in academic journals that focused on strategic planning and business development methodologies. Academic publication would provide additional credibility and recognition for her innovative work, while establishing her reputation within scholarly communities that influenced consulting industry standards and practices. Beyond developing analytical capabilities and external recognition, Catherine began building relationships with senior executives from technology companies who could provide insights into client requirements and strategic challenges that were emerging within the technology sector. These relationships provided valuable intelligence about market trends and client preferences that enhanced her understanding of strategic opportunities. The executive relationships also created potential opportunities for direct consulting engagements that could demonstrate her capabilities in leadership roles rather than supporting positions. Several technology executives expressed interest in working with Catherine directly on strategic planning initiatives that required the specialized expertise she had developed. Catherine carefully balanced her external relationship development with her responsibilities at Hartwell Industries, ensuring that her activities remained ethically appropriate while building capabilities and connections that could enhance her professional advancement opportunities. She was transparent with her supervisor about her external educational and professional development activities, while maintaining confidentiality about client relationships and proprietary analytical methodologies. Her supervisor, Marcus Webb, supported Catherine's professional development efforts and appreciated the external recognition that reflected positively on Hartwell's analytical capabilities. However, he also recognized that her growing external reputation might eventually create retention challenges if her advancement opportunities within the firm remained limited by organizational structure and hierarchy constraints. The professional development strategy Catherine pursued required substantial time and financial investments that extended far beyond normal career development activities. She worked evenings and weekends to complete executive education coursework, develop analytical tools, write articles, and prepare conference presentations while maintaining her full-time responsibilities at Hartwell Industries. The investment in capability building and external recognition represented a strategic approach to professional advancement that addressed the organizational limitations she had encountered within traditional promotion pathways. Rather than relying solely on internal performance evaluation processes, she was building credibility and expertise that could influence how her contributions were perceived and valued by senior leadership. Catherine's hidden preparation activities were designed to establish her reputation as a strategic thinker and analytical innovator, rather than simply a high-performing analyst who provided excellent supporting work. The external validation and recognition would create leverage for internal advancement while providing alternative career opportunities if organizational constraints continued to limit her progression within Hartwell Industries. The preparation phase required discipline and persistence to maintain quality performance in her current role, while investing substantial additional effort in capability building and external relationship development. Catherine understood that the investment would require sustained commitment over extended periods before generating meaningful career advancement opportunities. However, the early results from her external activities demonstrated that her analytical capabilities and strategic insights were valued by broader business communities that recognized innovation and practical value, rather than simply organizational hierarchy and traditional career progression patterns. The external recognition provided validation that her capabilities warranted advancement opportunities commensurate with their quality and business impact. The hidden preparation activities were establishing Catherine as a recognized expert in strategic analysis methodologies and technology sector consulting approaches, while building relationships and capabilities that would eventually enable her to claim appropriate recognition for her contributions and expertise within the consulting industry. Catherine's position within Hartwell Industries provided unique access to organizational information and decision-making processes that were typically invisible to employees at her hierarchical level. Her analytical responsibilities required reviewing project documentation, client communication records, and strategic planning materials that revealed the underlying dynamics governing career advancement, resource allocation, and recognition distribution within the firm. This privileged access enabled her to develop comprehensive understanding of how success was actually measured and rewarded, rather than relying on the official policies and stated values that were communicated through formal channels. The executive floor contained conference rooms where senior leadership conducted strategic planning sessions, client relationship reviews, and performance evaluation discussions that shaped promotional decisions and compensation adjustments. Catherine's analytical work often required accessing documents and materials that were stored in these areas, providing opportunities to observe organizational dynamics that influenced career trajectories and professional advancement opportunities. Through careful observation and document analysis, Catherine began recognizing patterns in how strategic contributions were attributed and valued within the firm's decision-making processes. The formal organizational chart depicted clear hierarchical relationships and reporting structures, but the actual influence networks that shaped strategic decisions operated according to different principles that emphasized personal relationships, historical precedents, and informal authority structures. Senior leadership consistently attributed strategic insights and innovative solutions to individuals who held client-facing positions or formal leadership roles, regardless of where those insights actually originated. Project documentation routinely characterized analytical contributions as supporting work that enabled strategic decisions rather than strategic thinking that directly influenced business outcomes. This systematic attribution pattern ensured that recognition and advancement opportunities flowed predominantly to individuals who occupied positions with formal authority, rather than those who generated the intellectual capital that drove success. The client relationship management structure at Hartwell Industries reinforced these attribution patterns by establishing clear boundaries between strategic decision-making roles and analytical support functions. Client-facing consultants maintained exclusive authority for presenting strategic recommendations and negotiating contract terms, while analysts provided research and analysis that remained invisible to clients regardless of its quality or strategic importance. Catherine discovered that client feedback and satisfaction scores were systematically analyzed to identify factors that influenced contract renewals and expansion opportunities. However, these analyses focused primarily on relationship management effectiveness and presentation quality, rather than the underlying analytical work that generated strategic insights and practical solutions. Clients were rarely aware of the analytical contributions that shaped the strategic recommendations they received, making it impossible for them to provide feedback that would recognize analytical excellence. The firm's business development processes also revealed systematic biases that favored individuals with established client relationships and external industry visibility over those who possessed superior analytical capabilities or strategic thinking skills. New business opportunities were typically assigned to consultants who had previous relationships with potential clients or who had achieved recognition within specific industry sectors, regardless of their actual expertise in addressing the strategic challenges those clients faced. Revenue attribution systems within Hartwell Industries demonstrated another dimension of organizational bias that influenced career advancement opportunities. Individual performance evaluations included metrics for revenue generation and client acquisition that were primarily credited to client-facing consultants, while analytical contributions were characterized as cost centers that supported revenue-generating activities rather than directly contributing to business growth. These revenue attribution approaches created systematic disadvantages for analytical roles in performance evaluations and compensation decisions, since their contributions were measured through productivity metrics and quality assessments rather than direct business impact measurements. The resulting compensation disparities reinforced organizational hierarchies that valued relationship management over analytical excellence, regardless of the comparative contribution levels generated by each function. Catherine also observed that strategic planning processes at the executive level relied heavily on external market research and industry benchmarking studies, rather than the analytical insights and market intelligence that were generated through client engagement activities. Senior leadership appeared to value external validation and industry-standard approaches over internal analytical capabilities that might provide more accurate or actionable strategic guidance. This preference for external validation reflected broader organizational dynamics that emphasized conformity with industry standards, rather than innovation or competitive differentiation through superior analytical capabilities. The firm's strategic planning approached prioritized approaches that could be easily justified to board members and external stakeholders, rather than pursuing innovative strategies that might provide competitive advantages but carried higher perceived risks. The promotion and advancement criteria that governed career progression at Hartwell Industries became clearly apparent through Catherine's analysis of personnel decisions and organizational announcements. Successful advancement required demonstration of client relationship management capabilities, revenue generation responsibility, and leadership of high-visibility projects that generated external recognition for the firm. Analytical excellence, regardless of its quality or business impact, was considered necessary but insufficient for career advancement beyond senior analyst positions. The firm's leadership development programs focused primarily on relationship building, presentation skills, and project management capabilities, rather than analytical methodologies or strategic thinking frameworks that might enhance decision-making quality. Catherine recognized that the organizational structure at Hartwell Industries reflected broader consulting industry patterns that systematically undervalued analytical contributions while overemphasizing client relationship management and external visibility. These patterns were not unique to her current employer but represented systematic biases that characterized the entire consulting sector and created similar advancement challenges for analytical professionals across multiple firms. The competitive dynamics within the consulting industry reinforced these biases by rewarding firms that could demonstrate immediate client satisfaction and rapid revenue growth, rather than long-term strategic thinking or analytical innovation. Client acquisition processes typically emphasized relationship building and presentation effectiveness over analytical capabilities, creating market incentives that supported the organizational hierarchies that marginalized analytical contributions. Industry recognition systems also favored individuals who achieved external visibility through conference presentations, published articles, and industry leadership positions, rather than those who generated exceptional analytical work that remained internal to their organizations. These recognition patterns influenced how consulting firms approached talent development and career advancement, prioritizing external marketability over internal analytical excellence. Catherine's understanding of these systematic dynamics enabled her to recognize that her advancement challenges were not simply organizational problems that could be resolved through improved performance or internal advocacy. The limitations she faced reflected deeply embedded industry structures that would require strategic action to overcome, rather than incremental improvements in analytical quality or internal relationship building. The external recognition and capability building activities that Catherine had pursued through executive education and industry publications represented strategic responses to these systematic limitations rather than traditional career development approaches. Her analysis of organizational dynamics had revealed that internal excellence alone would not generate appropriate advancement opportunities within existing industry structures. The consulting industry's emphasis on billable hours and project-based revenue generation also created systematic pressure to minimize investment in analytical innovation or strategic thinking development that could enhance long-term competitive positioning. Firms were incentivized to focus on immediate client satisfaction and rapid project completion rather than developing analytical capabilities that might provide sustained competitive advantages. These short-term focus patterns influenced how resources were allocated within consulting firms and how individual performance was evaluated and rewarded. Analytical work that required substantial time investment or innovative approaches was often discouraged in favor of standardized methodologies that could be applied efficiently across multiple client engagements, regardless of their comparative effectiveness for addressing specific strategic challenges. Catherine also discovered that client acquisition and retention decisions were heavily influenced by the personal relationships and industry reputations of senior consultants, rather than the analytical capabilities or strategic insights that actually drove project success. Clients typically selected consulting firms based on the perceived expertise and industry standing of individual consultants who would serve as primary relationship managers, without detailed evaluation of the analytical support capabilities that would actually generate strategic recommendations. This client selection process created systematic advantages for consultants who had achieved external recognition and industry visibility, while analytical professionals who generated exceptional work remained invisible to potential clients regardless of their contribution levels. The resulting business development patterns reinforced organizational hierarchies that marginalized analytical excellence while prioritizing relationship management and external positioning. The performance measurement systems used by Hartwell Industries and other consulting firms also reflected these biases through evaluation criteria that emphasized client feedback, project completion rates, and revenue responsibility rather than analytical innovation or strategic thinking quality. These measurement approaches ensured that career advancement opportunities flowed predominantly to individuals who excelled in client relationship management, rather than those who generated the intellectual capital that actually drove client satisfaction and business success. Catherine's comprehensive analysis of these organizational and industry dynamics provided strategic intelligence that would enable her to develop effective responses to the advancement limitations she faced. Understanding the systematic nature of these constraints enabled her to recognize that overcoming them would require strategic action that addressed industry-wide patterns rather than simply improving her performance within existing organizational structures. The human dynamics that shaped Catherine's professional journey extended far beyond the formal organizational structure at Hartwell Industries, encompassing a complex network of relationships that influenced both her daily work experience and her long-term career trajectory. These relationships provided essential context for understanding how organizational decisions were made, how influence was exercised, and how career advancement opportunities were distributed among competing professionals within the firm. Marcus Webb, Catherine's direct supervisor, represented the most significant relationship in her immediate professional environment. As a senior director with 12 years of experience at Hartwell Industries, Marcus possessed comprehensive understanding of organizational dynamics and maintained strategic relationships throughout the firm's executive hierarchy. His leadership style emphasized collaborative problem-solving and analytical excellence, creating an environment where Catherine's capabilities could flourish, despite broader organizational constraints that limited recognition for analytical contributions. Marcus had joined Hartwell Industries following completion of his MBA at University of Chicago Booth School of Business, where he had specialized in strategic analysis and market development frameworks. His academic background provided intellectual foundation for appreciating the sophisticated analytical work that Catherine produced, while his organizational experience enabled him to navigate the political dynamics that influenced how her contributions were perceived and valued by senior leadership. The relationship between Catherine and Marcus evolved from traditional supervisor-subordinate dynamics to collaborative partnership, as Marcus recognized the exceptional quality of her analytical work and strategic thinking capabilities. He began including her in client meetings and strategic planning discussions that were typically restricted to senior consultants, providing opportunities for her to demonstrate capabilities that extended far beyond conventional analyst responsibilities. However, Marcus also understood the organizational limitations that constrained his ability to advocate effectively for Catherine's advancement. The firm's hierarchical structure and established promotion criteria created systematic barriers to recognizing analytical excellence that occurred outside formal leadership roles. His advocacy efforts were limited by organizational policies that required client-facing experience and revenue generation responsibility for advancement to senior consulting positions. Marcus provided Catherine with honest assessments of organizational dynamics and career advancement challenges, helping her understand the systematic factors that influenced promotional decisions and recognition distribution. His guidance enabled her to develop realistic expectations about internal advancement opportunities while encouraging her to pursue external capability-building activities that could enhance her professional positioning. The relationship also provided Catherine with access to strategic intelligence about organizational decision-making processes and client relationship management approaches that informed her understanding of consulting industry dynamics. Marcus shared insights about executive priorities, competitive pressures, and strategic planning considerations that shaped how the firm approached market opportunities and resource allocation decisions. Daniel Morgan, Catherine's younger brother, entered Hartwell Industries 18 months after her arrival with substantial advantages that reflected both his educational credentials and his natural leadership presence. His MBA from Wharton Business School and previous experience at Morrison Consulting positioned him as an attractive candidate for client-facing roles that offered accelerated advancement opportunities within the firm's organizational structure. Daniel's personality and professional approach differed significantly from Catherine's collaborative and analytical style. He possessed exceptional interpersonal skills and natural charisma that enabled him to build client relationships effectively while projecting confidence in strategic discussions and business development activities. His presentation abilities and executive presence aligned perfectly with organizational expectations for client-facing consultants who would represent the firm in high-stakes business development contexts. The sibling relationship between Catherine and Daniel was complicated by their professional proximity and the contrasting career trajectories that their different organizational roles enabled. Catherine had initially welcomed Daniel's arrival at Hartwell Industries, hoping that family connection might provide opportunities for collaboration and mutual professional support within the firm's competitive environment. However, the organizational dynamics that governed project assignments and recognition distribution created systematic advantages for Daniel's client-facing role, while limiting Catherine's visibility and advancement opportunities. The firm's emphasis on relationship management and external visibility favored Daniel's capabilities, while undervaluing the analytical excellence that Catherine consistently demonstrated through her strategic contributions. Daniel's assignment to lead the Southeast Expansion Project represented a significant career opportunity that leveraged his relationship management capabilities, while requiring analytical support that exceeded his technical expertise. The project's complexity and strategic importance created pressure for exceptional performance that would establish his reputation within the firm while potentially accelerating his advancement trajectory. Catherine's decision to provide comprehensive analytical support for Daniel's project reflected both family loyalty and professional commitment to ensuring project success. Her contributions extended far beyond traditional analyst responsibilities to include strategic planning, relationship development, and implementation guidance that was essential for achieving the exceptional results that characterized the Southeast Expansion Initiative. The collaboration between Catherine and Daniel on the Southeast Project revealed both the complementary nature of their capabilities and the organizational dynamics that would determine how their contributions were recognized and attributed. Daniel's client-facing responsibilities provided visibility and recognition opportunities, while Catherine's analytical work remained largely invisible to senior leadership and external stakeholders. Sarah Kim, Chief Executive Officer of Nexus Technologies, emerged as one of Catherine's most important professional relationships outside Hartwell Industries. Sarah's technology sector experience and strategic leadership perspective provided valuable insights into client requirements and market dynamics that enhanced Catherine's understanding of consulting industry trends and competitive positioning factors. The relationship with Sarah developed through Catherine's exceptional performance on the Nexus Technologies engagement, where her innovative analytical approaches and practical strategic recommendations generated remarkable business results that exceeded client expectations. Sarah's feedback consistently praised Catherine's understanding of technology sector dynamics and her ability to develop solutions that addressed complex strategic challenges effectively. Sarah became an advocate for Catherine's capabilities within the technology sector, recommending her specifically to other executives who sought strategic consulting services. These recommendations created opportunities for Catherine to work with additional technology clients, while building her reputation as an innovative analytical thinker who could address industry-specific challenges that traditional consulting approaches often failed to resolve. The relationship also provided Catherine with access to technology sector networks and professional development opportunities that were not readily available through her position at Hartwell Industries. Sarah invited Catherine to participate in industry conferences and executive roundtable discussions, where she could demonstrate her expertise while building relationships with potential clients and strategic partners. More importantly, Sarah served as an external validation source for Catherine's capabilities and strategic insights, providing feedback that confirmed the exceptional quality of her analytical work and strategic thinking abilities. This validation was particularly valuable because it came from sophisticated technology sector leadership, rather than internal organizational sources that might be perceived as biased or limited in scope. Jennifer Chen, a fellow analyst at Hartwell Industries who specialized in financial services sector analysis, provided professional peer support and collaborative partnership that enhanced Catherine's understanding of consulting industry dynamics across different market segments. Jennifer's analytical capabilities and strategic thinking skills were comparable to Catherine's, creating natural foundation for collaborative relationship that benefited both professionals. The relationship with Jennifer revealed that the advancement challenges Catherine faced were not unique to her individual circumstances but reflected systematic organizational patterns that affected multiple high-performing analysts regardless of their specialization areas or performance levels. Jennifer had encountered similar recognition limitations and career advancement constraints, despite consistently exceptional analytical work and strategic contributions. Jennifer's experience in financial services sector consulting provided comparative perspective on client requirements and analytical methodologies that enhanced Catherine's understanding of strategic consulting applications across different industry contexts. The collaborative relationship enabled both analysts to share insights and strategic approaches that improve their analytical capabilities while building professional support networks within the firm. The relationship also provided emotional support and professional validation during periods when organizational constraints and recognition limitations created frustration or discouragement about career advancement prospects. Having peer support from someone who understood the systematic challenges facing analytical professionals was essential for maintaining motivation and strategic focus during difficult periods. Margaret Thornfield, Chief Executive Officer of Hartwell Industries, represented the ultimate authority figure whose perspectives and decisions shaped organizational culture and career advancement opportunities for all employees. Margaret's leadership philosophy emphasized collaborative excellence and merit-based advancement, but her practical implementation of these principles reflected the consulting industry biases that systematically undervalued analytical contributions. Catherine's interactions with Margaret were limited but significant, providing insights into executive priorities and decision-making criteria that influenced organizational direction and resource allocation decisions. Margaret's responses to Catherine's strategic recommendations revealed the organizational assumptions that governed how analytical contributions were perceived and valued within strategic planning processes. The relationship dynamics between Catherine and Margaret reflected broader patterns of executive leadership that prioritized traditional consulting approaches and established organizational hierarchies over analytical innovation or strategic thinking excellence that originated from non-leadership positions. Margaret's dismissal of Catherine's technology sector analysis demonstrated the systematic barriers that prevented exceptional analytical work from influencing strategic decisions regardless of its quality or relevance. Dr. Robert Harrison, Catherine's graduate school mentor from Northwestern University, provided ongoing professional guidance and strategic career advice that helped her navigate the advancement challenges she encountered at Hartwell Industries. Dr. Harrison's academic perspective and industry connections offered alternative viewpoints on career development strategies and professional positioning approaches. The relationship with Dr. Harrison provided access to executive education opportunities and industry networking events that enhanced Catherine's capabilities, while building external recognition for her analytical expertise. His guidance was instrumental in encouraging Catherine to pursue publication and speaking opportunities that established her reputation beyond her immediate organizational environment. Dr. Harrison also served as a strategic advisor for Catherine's capability-building activities, helping her identify skill development priorities and external validation opportunities that could enhance her professional positioning within the consulting industry. His academic credibility and industry relationships provided valuable endorsement for her analytical innovations and strategic thinking capabilities. These relationship dynamics created a complex web of professional interactions that influenced Catherine's daily work experience, career advancement opportunities, and strategic decision-making processes. Understanding these relationships was essential for developing effective approaches to overcoming organizational limitations, while building capabilities and recognition that could support long-term career advancement objectives. The months following Catherine's initial dismissal at the quarterly strategy meeting established a troubling pattern of escalating underestimation that became increasingly difficult to rationalize or accept. Each subsequent incident built upon previous experiences, creating cumulative evidence that her analytical contributions would continue to be systematically devalued regardless of their quality, relevance, or business impact. The pattern revealed organizational dynamics that extended beyond individual biases to reflect deeper structural problems that affected how strategic expertise was recognized and rewarded within consulting environments. The first significant escalation occurred during the Midwest Regional Expansion Review meeting, where Catherine had been invited to present analytical findings that would inform strategic decisions about resource allocation and market development priorities. Her analysis had identified emerging market opportunities in 3 metropolitan areas that showed exceptional potential for technology sector consulting services, based on comprehensive research into economic development patterns, industry cluster formation, and competitive positioning factors. Catherine's presentation included detailed market segmentation analysis that revealed specific industry sectors where Hartwell Industries could establish competitive advantages through specialized expertise and targeted service delivery approaches. The research had required months of data collection and analysis, incorporating economic indicators, business development trends, and competitive intelligence that provided sophisticated understanding of market dynamics and client requirements. The analytical framework Catherine presented demonstrated how traditional consulting approaches were inadequately suited to emerging market segments, where rapid technological change and evolving business models created strategic challenges that required adaptive consulting methodologies. Her recommendations included specific strategies for building client relationships and delivering services that could address these evolving requirements while generating sustainable competitive advantages. Senior Director James Morrison, who had previously dismissed Catherine's technology sector recommendations, interrupted her presentation after 15 minutes to redirect discussion toward conventional market development approaches that emphasized standardized service delivery and established client relationship management protocols. His intervention effectively terminated Catherine's opportunity to present the strategic insights that had emerged from her comprehensive analysis. Morrison's dismissal was based not on analytical weaknesses or methodological concerns, but on organizational preferences for approaches that aligned with existing capabilities and established operational procedures. His comments characterized Catherine's recommendations as overly complex and potentially risky, without substantive evaluation of their strategic merit or business development potential. The executive team accepted Morrison's assessment without requesting additional information or conducting independent evaluation of Catherine's analytical work. The meeting concluded with approval of conventional expansion strategies that ignored the market opportunities Catherine had identified and failed to address the competitive challenges that would limit traditional approaches in emerging market segments. The dismissal followed the same pattern that had characterized Catherine's earlier experience with technology sector strategy recommendations. But the stakes were significantly higher because the Midwest expansion represented substantial resource allocation decisions that would influence the firm's competitive positioning for multiple years. The failure to incorporate her strategic insights would likely result in missed opportunities and suboptimal resource utilization that could have been avoided through more comprehensive analytical evaluation. Catherine's analysis proved prescient when competitor consulting firms successfully penetrated the market opportunities she had identified using approaches similar to her recommendations. Within 18 months, 3 competing firms had established strong market positions in the metropolitan areas where Catherine had recommended expansion, while Hartwell Industries struggled to gain traction using conventional approaches that failed to address local market dynamics effectively. The competitive losses represented missed revenue opportunities exceeding $12 million over the subsequent 3-year period, demonstrating the substantial business cost of organizational decision-making processes that failed to incorporate available analytical expertise effectively. However, the connection between Catherine's recommendations and the subsequent competitive disadvantages was not acknowledged formally within organizational performance evaluations or strategic planning reviews. The second major escalation occurred during the annual client satisfaction analysis, where Catherine had developed innovative methodologies for evaluating client feedback and identifying factors that influenced contract renewal rates and service expansion opportunities. Her analytical framework incorporated both quantitative metrics and qualitative assessment approaches that provided comprehensive understanding of client satisfaction drivers and strategic relationship management opportunities. The analysis revealed that client satisfaction was significantly influenced by factors that were not captured through standard feedback protocols, including the perceived quality of strategic insights, the adaptability of consulting recommendations to changing business conditions, and the consultant's understanding of industry-specific challenges that affected implementation success. Catherine's findings indicated that analytical excellence and strategic innovation were primary drivers of client satisfaction, rather than relationship management capabilities alone. Her recommendations included specific strategies for enhancing client satisfaction through improved analytical support, more sophisticated strategic planning methodologies, and adaptive service delivery approaches that could respond to evolving client requirements. The framework provided actionable guidance for improving both client retention and expansion opportunities, while differentiating Hartwell Industries from competitors through superior analytical capabilities. However, when Catherine presented her findings to the Client Relationship Committee, her recommendations were characterized as analytically interesting but practically challenging to implement within existing organizational structures. Committee members expressed concerns about resource requirements and operational complexity without conducting detailed evaluation of potential business benefits or competitive advantages that could result from implementing her recommendations. The committee approved alternative approaches that emphasized relationship management training and standardized client communication protocols, rather than the analytical innovations and strategic planning enhancements that Catherine's research had identified as primary satisfaction drivers. The decision reflected organizational preferences for solutions that could be implemented within existing operational frameworks, rather than innovations that might require capability development or structural adjustments. The analytical insights Catherine had developed were subsequently validated through external industry research conducted by consulting trade organizations, which confirmed that client satisfaction was increasingly driven by analytical excellence and strategic innovation rather than traditional relationship management approaches. The external validation demonstrated the accuracy of her findings while highlighting the missed opportunities that resulted from organizational failure to implement her recommendations. The third significant escalation involved the strategic planning process for technology sector service development, where Catherine had been specifically requested to develop analytical frameworks for addressing the unique challenges that characterized fast-moving technology markets. Her analysis had identified specific service delivery approaches that could provide competitive advantages while addressing client requirements that were inadequately served by traditional consulting methodologies. Catherine's strategic planning contribution included comprehensive market analysis, competitive positioning assessment, and service delivery framework development that required substantial time investment and sophisticated analytical capabilities. The work represented strategic thinking at the highest level and provided practical guidance for achieving competitive advantages in challenging market segments. However, when the Technology Sector Strategy Committee reviewed Catherine's recommendations, her analysis was referenced only as supporting research for strategic decisions that would be made based on broader organizational considerations. The committee characterized her contributions as valuable analytical input, while emphasizing that strategic planning required executive-level perspective that extended beyond individual analytical frameworks. The dismissal patterns became increasingly explicit as organizational leadership developed more sophisticated rationales for marginalizing analytical contributions regardless of their quality or strategic relevance. Catherine's expertise was acknowledged consistently, while her influence on strategic decisions was systematically limited through organizational processes that reserved decision-making authority for executives who often lacked the specialized knowledge required for optimal outcomes. The escalating pattern extended beyond formal meetings to include informal discussions and strategic planning conversations, where Catherine's perspectives were either excluded or characterized as specialist viewpoints that required broader contextual evaluation before influencing organizational strategy. The marginalization became more systematic and deliberate, as her expertise became more recognized and potentially threatening to established decision-making hierarchies. The cumulative effect of these escalating dismissals created professional frustration that extended beyond individual incidents to reflect deeper organizational problems that would require strategic response rather than continued acceptance of systematic undervaluation. Catherine recognized that the pattern would continue indefinitely unless she took decisive action to establish her expertise in ways that could not be dismissed or marginalized through organizational hierarchies. The escalation also revealed that organizational resistance to her contributions was not based on quality concerns or analytical weaknesses, but on structural biases that protected established authority patterns from challenges that might emerge from superior expertise located outside formal leadership positions. The resistance reflected organizational preferences for maintaining existing power distributions rather than optimizing decision-making quality through incorporation of available analytical excellence. Catherine's understanding of these escalating patterns provided strategic intelligence that would inform her eventual response to systematic underestimation. The patterns demonstrated that incremental improvements in analytical quality or relationship building would not generate appropriate recognition within organizational structures that were designed to marginalize contributions from non-executive positions, regardless of their strategic value or business impact. The escalating underestimation created conditions that would ultimately force Catherine to pursue strategic alternatives that could establish her expertise and capabilities in ways that organizational hierarchies could not dismiss or marginalize through traditional authority structures. The moment that crystallized Catherine's understanding of her position within Hartwell Industries occurred during the quarterly all-hands meeting in late September, when the firm's senior leadership announced the formation of a strategic innovation committee designed to enhance the company's competitive positioning through advanced analytical capabilities and cutting-edge consulting methodologies. The announcement should have represented recognition of the analytical excellence that Catherine had consistently demonstrated, but the committee composition revealed the systematic nature of organizational dynamics that would continue to exclude her from strategic decision-making processes, regardless of her expertise. Margaret Thornfield introduced the Strategic Innovation Committee as a response to increasing competitive pressures and evolving client requirements that demanded more sophisticated analytical approaches and strategic planning capabilities. The initiative reflected recognition that traditional consulting methodologies were becoming inadequate for addressing complex challenges that characterized rapidly changing business environments across multiple industry sectors. The committee's mandate included developing innovative analytical frameworks, establishing best practices for strategic consulting services, and creating competitive advantages through superior intellectual capital and strategic thinking capabilities. These responsibilities aligned precisely with Catherine's demonstrated expertise and the innovative work she had conducted throughout her tenure at Hartwell Industries. Margaret's presentation emphasized the critical importance of analytical innovation and strategic thinking excellence for maintaining the firm's competitive positioning in consulting markets that increasingly rewarded intellectual capital over traditional relationship management approaches. Her description of committee objectives read like a comprehensive summary of Catherine's contributions and capabilities, creating reasonable expectation that her expertise would be central to the initiative's success. However, when Margaret announced the committee membership, Catherine's name was conspicuously absent from the list of participants. The committee included senior directors and regional managers who possessed limited analytical expertise and strategic planning experience, compared to Catherine's demonstrated capabilities and innovative contributions. Several committee members had been involved in dismissing Catherine's recommendations during previous strategic planning discussions. The exclusion was particularly striking because Catherine had authored many of the analytical innovations and strategic frameworks that had generated the client satisfaction improvements and competitive advantages that prompted formation of the Strategic Innovation Committee. Her methodological contributions and strategic insights represented the intellectual foundation for many of the initiatives that the committee would be tasked with developing and implementing. Daniel's inclusion on the Strategic Innovation Committee provided additional evidence of the systematic biases that governed recognition and advancement opportunities within the organizational structure. His appointment was based on his leadership of the Southeast Expansion Project, without acknowledgement of Catherine's analytical contributions that had enabled the project's exceptional success. The committee appointment positioned Daniel for further career advancement while reinforcing Catherine's marginalization from strategic planning processes. The announcement concluded with Margaret's statement that the Strategic Innovation Committee would have substantial influence over resource allocation decisions, strategic planning initiatives, and business development priorities that would shape the firm's direction for the next 5 years. Committee participation would provide members with high-visibility leadership opportunities and direct access to executive decision-making processes that typically accelerated career advancement trajectories. Catherine observed the announcement from her position in the back of the auditorium, surrounded by other analysts and junior consultants whose specialized expertise was essential for the firm's success, but whose organizational influence remained limited by hierarchical structures that reserved strategic authority for individuals with formal leadership positions. The physical positioning reflected the organizational dynamics that systematically excluded analytical excellence from strategic decision-making processes. Following the meeting, Catherine returned to her workstation and reviewed the extensive documentation of analytical innovations and strategic contributions she had developed over nearly 6 years at Hartwell Industries. The portfolio included methodological frameworks that had generated millions of dollars in client satisfaction improvements, strategic insights that had enabled competitive advantages, and analytical innovations that had established the firm's reputation for excellence in multiple industry sectors. The documentation revealed the scope and sophistication of her contributions, while highlighting the systematic attribution patterns that had prevented her from receiving appropriate recognition or advancement opportunities. Every major analytical innovation had been attributed to project directors or regional managers, while her role was consistently characterized as providing supporting research rather than strategic leadership. Catherine's review of client feedback and performance metrics demonstrated that her analytical contributions had consistently exceeded organizational expectations while generating measurable business benefits that enhanced the firm's competitive positioning and revenue generation capabilities. Client satisfaction scores for projects involving her analytical work were consistently higher than firm-wide averages, while contract renewal rates and expansion opportunities showed similar superior performance patterns. The evidence provided undeniable proof that her capabilities warranted recognition and advancement opportunities commensurate with her contributions and business impact. However, the formation of the Strategic Innovation Committee, without her inclusion, demonstrated that exceptional performance alone would not generate appropriate organizational recognition within existing hierarchical structures and decision-making processes. The breaking point crystallized when Catherine realized that her expertise was simultaneously essential for the firm's success and systematically excluded from strategic planning processes that would determine how that expertise was developed and applied. The organizational dynamics created conditions where her contributions were valued as inputs, but not as strategic thinking that warranted leadership recognition or decision-making authority. Catherine understood that continuing to accept this marginalization would represent professional self-destruction, that would prevent her from achieving career advancement commensurate with her capabilities and contributions. The pattern of systematic exclusion had reached levels that could no longer be rationalized as temporary organizational constraints or incremental career development challenges. The breaking point moment was not characterized by emotional outburst or dramatic confrontation, but by clinical recognition that strategic action was required to establish her expertise and capabilities in ways that organizational hierarchies could not dismiss or marginalize. The decision was analytical rather than emotional, based on comprehensive evaluation of evidence and strategic assessment of available alternatives. Catherine recognized that her choice was between accepting permanent marginalization within organizational structures that would never provide appropriate recognition, or taking strategic action to establish her professional positioning in ways that would generate recognition commensurate with her capabilities and contributions. The decision required courage and strategic thinking, but the foundation for success had been established through years of capability building and external recognition development. The breaking point also clarified that her advancement challenges were not personal limitations or performance deficiencies, but systematic organizational problems that affected multiple high-performing analytical professionals. The formation of the Strategic Innovation Committee without analytical expertise representation demonstrated that these problems reflected deliberate structural choices rather than oversight or temporary constraints. Catherine's extensive preparation through executive education, industry publications, and external relationship building had created strategic alternatives that enabled her to pursue career advancement outside traditional organizational hierarchies that had proven inadequate for recognizing analytical excellence. The external validation and capability development provided foundation for strategic action that could establish her expertise independently. The moment of decision was influenced by her understanding that organizational changes at Hartwell Industries would likely require years or decades to address the systematic biases that marginalized analytical contributions. Waiting for internal recognition would represent opportunity cost that could prevent her from achieving career advancement during optimal professional development periods. Catherine also recognized that her departure from Hartwell Industries could provide valuable lessons for other high-performing analytical professionals who faced similar advancement challenges within consulting organizations. Strategic action to establish independent recognition could demonstrate alternative pathways for career development that were not dependent on organizational structures that systematically undervalued analytical excellence. The breaking point moment represented transition from reactive frustration to strategic action planning that would enable Catherine to claim appropriate recognition for her capabilities and contributions. The decision was supported by comprehensive analysis of available alternatives and realistic assessment of probability for achieving career advancement objectives through different strategic approaches. The moment also reflected Catherine's growing confidence in her capabilities and strategic thinking abilities that had been validated through external recognition and client feedback rather than internal organizational processes. The external validation provided foundation for independent action that was not dependent on organizational approval or hierarchical advancement permissions. Catherine's decision to pursue strategic alternatives represented commitment to professional excellence and personal integrity, rather than emotional reaction to organizational frustration. The choice reflected strategic thinking about long-term career development objectives and realistic assessment of methods for achieving those objectives within competitive consulting industry environments. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.